This is the Allura Code, a transmission for creators, sensitives, and visionaries who know they're built for more, who can feel the signal beneath the noise. Here we decode the hidden patterns running your life, the ones shaping your wealth, your relationships, your body, your art. It blends human design, field energetics, ancient tech, and quantum energetic architecture to recalibrate your system back to truth. You will learn to tune into your body, recognize what truth feels like, and use that as your guidance. This is a multidimensional approach to allow the whole of your being to come together in a convergence of self-discovery and alignment so that you may begin live from full alignment and press play on life. This isn't self-help, it's self-remembrance. Each episode is a map, a key, a mirror. If you dare to meet the real you beneath the programming, welcome home to the Allura Code.
Hello, and welcome to another edition of the Allura Code podcast. Today, I have the privilege of speaking with Jasmine Gatton. She is a lifelong practitioner of yoga, of embodiment, of spiritual curiosity. She lives in Barcelona. And she has created this or is building this community for like-minded people who are on the path to converse, to share, she guides meditation. She's been an active yoga practitioner for about 13 years. She also, which adds a very interesting element to her unique offerings, is she also has a degree in biochemistry. So her vantage point on the totality of everything is very unique, and as far as I'm concerned, is extremely fascinating. So, Jasmine, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much. I'm extremely excited to be here and have this conversation with you.
Wonderful. So maybe we can just start off kind of like what we were chatting about is I'd love, and I think the listeners would love to, in your own words, just hear about your, what you're doing in regards to the culmination of the work and the experiences that you've had up to this point, and kind of what that's looking like now. Maybe share some highlights that you've had. Basically, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. I don't even know where to start. There's so many things to share. I think I can start with where I am currently. And so I recently moved to Barcelona and I started to creating my dream life. And it looks like me helping people. I'm sure there's going to be a question, what was the turning point? And I'm going to get back to that. But what I'm currently doing is I'm trying to build a community of people um, that help, helps them nourish their mind, body, and soul. So happiness is a sanctuary where people come to do yoga, to do movements, cacao ceremonies, meditations. I also collaborate with others in the space at ecstatic dances, different business meetings, and also retreats. And the whole purpose of this, as I mentioned, to have a space and community where people can come and heal different aspects of their presence here. And then before this, I used to work in sales and business development, which is kind of funny thinking about what that person was, who that person was, and who I am now. That phase of my life was in London, so I lived the true dream life of some people. When I used to live there, I truly felt like I'm in a movie.
Oh,
You
really?
see those movies where you dress up in the morning in your suit as a woman, you put your laptop in your bag, you buy your expensive coffee, and you walk into the office and you spend your whole day there, then you go home, work out, cook some dinner, go to bed. Like from the outside, it truly seemed like I'm living the dream life. On the side, I had money and time to travel, to see the world. Um, I was going on dates. I had amazing friends. We were partying every second weekend. So truly, I felt like for someone from the outside, it would seem like the dream life. And from that dream life, I went traveling, and then eventually I ended up here in Barcelona. And as you mentioned, before that, if you're going backwards, before becoming a salesperson and business development person, I had a degree in biological and chemical sciences. So I became a biochemist. I also used to work in toxicological laboratories and use my degree to then work in sales as well. So I'm very familiar with that aspect of life as well.
Okay, so in terms of, I mean, obviously um, with the quote unquote training that you've had, both traditional and non-traditional. And what I mean by that is obviously you went to university, you got your degree, you've worked in the field, you've gained experience, but also from the energetic side, because that's really the piece I'm more interested in, is what were maybe, let's say, a couple of sort of turning points for you, or peak experiences, or just things that really left a mark on you, sort of gearing you towards where you are now.
Absolutely. The first biggest turning point for me was to decide to study in the UK because I went to a German Hungarian bilingual school in Hungary, like a high school.
Mm-hmm.
And my parents and everyone thought I'm going to end up in Germany. That was the whole plan for 5 years. And the last 2 months, I announced that actually I'm more interested in going to the UK. The reason being is because I wanted to learn English better so then afterwards I can see the world. Because I felt like in Hungary, where I was born, I'm restricted and I don't have enough room. And I was so interested in everything that I needed to see the world, basically. So I moved to the UK. That was the biggest like shock because I didn't really speak English, right? From a German school, I ended up there studying science. I became super introverted. I couldn't really talk to anyone because I didn't speak the language. I didn't understand it. Then COVID happened, so I didn't even have a chance to practice English. I
Mm.
learned the biochemistry language, so I was really good in like speaking science. But on the day to day, I had a lot of trouble talking to people. And from that point, I thought to myself that wow, I don't really want to stick to or yeah get trapped in a laboratory for the rest of my life. And I thought, what would be the best way to get out of this um, job or like this mindset of me being in again restriction, right, being in a
Mhm.
laboratory for the rest of my life. So I thought, oh, I have to move to London and I have to learn how to speak to people. And the best way seemed to be at that time to enter sales. So the first turning point was to move from Hungary to the UK, completely different world, the two of them. Um, and then moving to London and starting to work in sales as an introverted, converting into an extroverted and learning a language on the spot. And when it came to that, I had zero friends per month. I lived in a really bad apartment. I had zero money and I was so desperate like nothing before. And because I didn't really had a chance for 3 years before I moved to London to learn how to communicate well or make friends, I found myself having so much trouble with connecting to people. And I thought that the best way to improve that is to learn communication, and I dived deep into that. So that was the second turning point in my life. So I ended up working in sales first and then business development. I've learned English, as you can hear, and I also learned how to communicate effectively and what people really want and what people really need. Because I'm not a sales, and I wasn't a salesperson who would be able to sell anything to anyone. And I didn't want it to do that, but I was really good at finding people who had the need to get what I was selling. And I think that comes with a kind of um, skill, I guess, that I have to develop on the spot, finding those people and understanding them. And I developed this skill of a really deep understanding of people. But at the same time, and that's when the third turning point came in my life. Whilst I was working there, like having this dream life, I realized that nothing made me happy. Not the traveling that I thought in my whole life that once I can travel, I'm gonna feel fulfilled. It didn't make me happy. It didn't make me happy. Then I thought, oh, once I have all this money, then I'm gonna be happy. That didn't make me happy. And then I also thought, oh, if I can get to New York, that was my biggest dream. I got to New York, and at 4 a.m. in the morning after a party, I was walking on my own home, and I felt more miserable than ever in my life. And so I did all these things that I thought that they would make me happy. And then I just got sadder and sadder and sadder, and I hit rock bottom. And I went to a therapist, and he told me that I'm actually depressed. I had no idea that I'm depressed, but he told me that I'm depressed, and he asked me to write down the things what made me happy to incorporate that throughout my days. So at least I have the desire to get out of bed. And I wrote down everything and we went through the list and he told me to, okay, now let's see if we can incorporate that. And I was like, I'm doing all these things every day. Like workout made me happy, yoga made me happy, traveling made me happy, reading and being with my friends. And I was doing them weekly. So then I was like, okay, if I do everything that's supposed to make me happy, how is it that I'm still not fulfilled? And the only thing that made me extremely grateful and extremely present was when my friends came to me and told me that, thank you so much that you told me that and you had me see that thing from a different perspective because it's changed my life. And so that was the biggest turning point in my life because I thought I can't stay here in London doing this job because I thought that it's meaningless. And what I have to do is helping people see this world differently. And whilst I thought that I have the capabilities, I wasn't myself there. So first I had to take myself on a journey of getting there where I wanted to get people. And I went on traveling the world working on myself. And eventually I ended up here in Barcelona. So I would say those are the three turning points. Yeah, I think that you got them right.
Yeah, that's quite a that's quite a, and you know what? I really like the fact that you took the time to add some detail because I find with depending on the person, you know, they just kind of skim over because the real meat, as far as I'm concerned, is in the depth of the conversation. And so and that just kind of naturally came out. So I don't have to ask you like 100,000 questions. So I thought that. Now, in terms of one thing did occur to me. Now, in terms of, you know, when you're in communion with other people, in terms of when you're providing a space, you know, in whatever capacity is, whether you're facilitating a meditation or it's, you know, it's a one-on-one or it's ecstatic dance or anything of that nature. What's your I mean, obviously you get fulfillment out of it, but I'm also wondering, when you're not doing that kind of stuff and being active, how do you experience life? So, for example, like, I don't know, say you're, something trivial like waiting for a train, or, you're something where there's a bit of downtime involved, and there's potentially, you're waiting to go out or whatever, waiting for a flight, and there's quote unquote time to kill. So how do you kind of how would you kind of work with that when you're really just left with you and your mind?
Absolutely. I I had a realization recently where I understood that no one is gonna come and help me, right? No one is gonna save me. I'm the only one who can save me. And previously, I had a mindset where I thought that if I start working out in 2 weeks, I'm gonna look amazing. And obviously, the result didn't come. And I was just working out for the purpose of working out. I was just walking for the purpose of walking, um, to look great. I was reading to become smart. I wasn't doing things for the purpose of enjoyment. I didn't find the everyday activities and my hobbies truly enjoyful. I just did them as a chore. And what's changed in me is that I realized that I'm not obligated to do any of these. I'm doing them because they make me happy. And even when I'm just walking on the street, that's what I think to myself, that, okay, I'm not obligated to walk here, but I choose to because I want to, because I had this time and I could decide to walk instead of standing on the train. Same when I'm standing at the airport. I can decide what I want to do. I have time to kill, right? What do I want to do with it? Do I want to listen to a podcast? Do I want to look around and find beautiful people around me or beautiful souls? Do I want to connect to different energies? Do I want to go into meditation? Like, actually, if you think about it, we have all this beautiful time that we get to choose what to do with. And usually, when I choose the activity, right, let's say at the airport, I choose to sit still. And sometimes I play this game of thinking that I'm in a simulation. And I always think to myself, okay, well, if this was a simulation and I made this simulation, so I'm the director of this whole game, and I place myself, let's say, let's stick with that airport example. If I put myself at this airport, what do I want me to do, or what do I want me to see at this in this setting, right? And so I would pick up on details around me: a smell, an energy, a color, an object. And I would deeply think about, why is it there? Or what does it want to show me? And I think it's just a really fun game to, quote unquote, kill time. But it's also helping to train my brain that I'm here on purpose, and it's not a punishment that I was born. And also it helps me to get out of my own mind and own body and be more part of the present experience.
Yeah, and that's, you know what? That's exactly where I was going with that question, and that's why I phrased it the way that I did. Because all too often, which this is actually going to lead to my next question, but I find all too often people, when they get confronted with a challenge, and especially when it involves when it threatens one's identity, there's usually a big wall that comes up. There's usually a big there's like a huge energetic block. And like, I think it's brilliant what you just described in terms of getting curious because, you know, this is what you naturally do. And it's in making choices like that that really allow people to create, you know, to liberate themselves from repetitive dysfunctional thinking. And actually, I'm going to add to this so most people are in the pursuit of happiness, which is great. There's nothing wrong with it. But what I've noticed is that in a lot of cases, I'm not saying in all, but in a lot of cases, people's version of happiness is dependent on circumstances being a certain way. And if they're not a certain way, then they can't be happy, right? Now, there's another aspect to this, and this is really kind of a core theme and a core lattice that's woven into the work that I'm doing, which is this idea of inner peace. Because the difference between the two is that happiness, well, the difference being is that you're not basing anything on circumstances being in any particular way. It's just finding peace in whatever the situation is. Like, I don't know. I'll share something. So this was when I was around 30. And so I had previously lived out in BC, which is British Columbia, which is Western Canada. I had lived out there for about 5 years. And I had gone out there because I was working out there in the summertime. And I'd moved out there to pursue snowboarding because at the time, that's what I wanted to do. Not only did I want to snowboard, but I wanted to teach snowboarding. So I got certified, blah, blah, blah. I actually did a season in Switzerland prior to moving to Whistler, which was in and of itself was it was a rush. And that's a whole other, you know, I could probably give a podcast just on the 2.5 months that I was there. But so, you know, so I'd gotten certified so I could go and do that co-op. And then the following spring I moved. So like I got back from Switzerland March 98. And then I left for BC at the end of April when I finished school. And it was interesting because this is another one, a story that I'd completely forgotten about. So I went planting again that year, and it was a complete disaster. I'd done the contract the year before, and you know, it worked with great people, had made great money, but that particular year, I couldn't plant a tree to save my life. I mean, I could plant them, but every little thing was just, and I remember this, it was horrible. It was my 22nd birthday, like the actual day of, and I spent that entire week replanting trees that I had planted the week before, because they found, I don't know, it was because my quality wasn't up to snuff. But what was interesting is, like I said, I had done the exact same contract the year before, and you know, no worries at all. So it really led to the headspace that I was in. And so anyway, fast forward 10 years. So I finished, I didn't even wind up finishing the contract. I actually got fired. And then I went to hang out with a friend for a couple of weeks. And then I wound up getting another planting gig in a different space. And I was there for about 4 days, and I couldn't do it. I was like, I'm so done with this. And my sister was living in Whistler at the time, and I phoned her up. I said, I just quit my planting job. I'm coming. So I got there. I stayed one night on her couch. And then the next day, everything just fell right into place. I found a job, got a place, like it all happened really, really quick. Yeah. So anyway, fast forward. And, I have a tendency to lose my train of thought sometimes, and I cannot remember why I started telling the story. Oh, because life had other plans for me. And so it moved me, because my plan was originally to go planting until the end of the summer and then go to Whistler. But for whatever reason, the universe had other plans for me and put me in Whistler at the beginning of June instead of the beginning of September. So, okay. So I get to spend the summer in Whistler. Oh, darn. In the mountains, it's, Whistler's a resort town. I don't know if you're familiar with it or not, but
No.
it's they had the Olympics there in 2010. So anyway, it's a really well-known ski resort. So
Okay.
I wound up spending 5 years there. And then I moved back. So I did my 5 years. I came back to Ontario. That's a whole other story. Won't get into it. Went back out in 2005 and did my last 2 seasons of planting. And then I moved to Vancouver. Actually, no. I went back to Whistler first, and it was not exactly, it was, how it's like, how can I explain this? It's basically going back to something that is familiar, but you thought it might be different because you were freaking delusional and you weren't, you weren't engaged in this idea of evolution. And so, and my plan had changed, like from the summer that I had previously talked about. So anyway, so I had in between, I had gone back to Whistler, and I was there for like 3 months, and it just was, I mean, it worked out, but I wound up getting a job as soon as I got there, and then 2 weeks later I got fired, and I still to this day have no idea why. And then I just wound up getting the first job that I could because I needed to. And then later that summer I went planting, and everything turned out fine. But then the following summer I planted again, but this time I went right till October. And I knew at that point, I knew that I was done. And so I moved to Vancouver, and I was there for 3 months. I got into a car accident and got fired from 2 jobs.
Oh, wow.
all within the span of, you know what I mean? So it was like, it was pretty clear. And that's when I moved back to Toronto. I started working on my real estate license. I got my license in 2008, and that was 17 years ago. And I've been doing that ever since. But this whole process of everything else has been on the side, but it really hasn't. It's been behind the scenes, but it's actually been a lot more prevalent, especially when I started formally doing studying on this. And, because when you look back and you can kind of see how everything, and why everything lined up the way that it did. So like with you, for example, like the whole changing your mind at the last minute, or for lack of a better term, last minute, and not staying in Hungary to do university, but to go to London, and then getting into that sales job, because and from what I can see from what you're telling me, it's just like you're following your bliss, and whether or not you were aware of that at the time, because obviously practicality dictates things, because you wanted to, but you also wanted to learn how to speak English, right?
Yeah.
And so,
Yeah.
right. And so that's what, but it was more than just a practicality thing, because I don't know whether you looked at it from the standpoint, but it was actually like a whole adventure for you to go from Hungary to England, primarily because it was just so vastly different from, and I wanted to, to draw those parallels, because oftentimes most people they play it safe. and they do, they don't take the risks because they're afraid of, they're afraid of safety. They're afraid of not being safe. So I know a guy, love him to death. Him and I are like complete opposites, but he has played that safe role his entire life. And I mean, for him, it works, but it's interesting because, we've had many conversations about this, and it's taken him a long time to understand why I do things the way that I do them. And it's because it's simply the way I'm wired. And that's why you do things the way that you do them, the way you make your decisions, the way you seek out information. It's literally because it's the way your energetic blueprint is wired. And when we can learn to tap into this, and even more on a more subtle level, it makes life so much more fascinating and kind of flow oriented. So
Absolutely.
yeah, so I just thought I'd share that. So in terms of so some of these ceremonies that you like to participate in, and that you like to facilitate, like the meditation that you do, and the cacao circles and stuff like that. I'm just curious, maybe just kind of walk me through what that looks like, and what people experience, maybe some of the interactions that you have, because you're obviously following your bliss. And yeah, so I'm curious, more as to what that looks like.
Absolutely. Do you mind if I just touch on a few points that you mentioned whilst you were talking? Because there are some things that came up in my mind that I wanted to share.
Sure.
Okay, perfect. So you mentioned that, it was, you touched upon the fact that I moved from Hungary to the UK, and that could be kind of like a risk, or a travel, or a journey. And I just wanted to share with those who listen to this, because I think sometimes we forget that everything that we experience in the 3D is the representation of what's happening inside.
Mm-hmm.
And if someone travels or even move to a new place, that means a new development of their internal being. So, me moving from Hungary to the UK changed me fundamentally, but that's true for every single person who ever travels or just leave their house. The external journey also represents an internal journey. And I just wanted to share it because I think it's also a very interesting game on of contemplating on what that journey means, because what we see externally we can interpret it internally, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's another like game that I like to play in my free time, to think about these journeys, and because I'm trying to interpret obviously everything I see, to and connect it to my internal, and the other way around. It's a dance of the two, right? Understanding the external and also the internal. Studying biochemistry, understanding more the external, but with that, I understand a lot more my internal as well.
Okay. All right. And so, yeah, so go ahead with was there anything else? Because you said,
Yeah, I also
so,
wanted to mention that you started talking about these things that you talked about, because you mentioned that happiness is, if people have this expectation about happiness, right? They have an idea of what they have to do or achieve in order to feel happy. And I wanted to add that, like, everything that you went through in your life, it seems like that you also had an idea of, oh, if I'm gonna do this, if I'm gonna go back to the same place where I did so well or I was happy, I'm gonna be happy again, because you had this expectation.
Mhm.
But I think we tend to mistaken happiness for a destination. And because of that, we expect that once we arrive there, we're going to be happy for the rest of the time. But what I experience in my life is that true happiness comes from the pursuit of that desire that we have and getting lost in the action so much that it makes us happy now. So,
Mm,
as I mentioned earlier, like thinking about the different things that I have to do, like going to the gym, journaling, I looked at these things as a chore,
mm,
but now I do them because I enjoy them. I choose to do them. I get lost in the action of doing them.
mm,
And so the action itself makes me happy now. Not that, oh, I look better because I go to the gym, but the action itself, doing it, and it gives you goosebumps to think about how much I changed, how much it changed my mindset. Just being in the gym makes me so happy,
mm,
or doing things that challenge me makes me happy. Not because it's gonna get me to a certain point, but because I can be so present and focus on the actual activity that will get me there, that makes me happy. I don't know
hmm.
what's your thought on happiness and how you see happiness.
Well, like I said, I see it as being joyful and being in a state of, you know, um, like being content in whatever it is that you're doing, regardless of circumstance. And I used to be, I mean, there obviously still is an element of this, but I used to be a lot more ex and it was interesting because it wasn't even something I was necessarily aware of. Um, but it's something that has presented itself more so over the last, over the last few years, which was, seeking the experience in external factors. Whereas, so there was a fundamental thing that I was something that I was introduced to a long time ago, and just over the years, it's really developed into something more, a lot more foundational, and that is that it's energy first. So I was listening to, or I was reading an article, or I was reading some comments on a video online, um, a few weeks ago, and one of the comments said, "Action first, then motivation." And while I don't disagree with that, because activity can generate more activity, because if you're doing stuff and you're building momentum, it's just going to naturally generate more activity. However, in order to generate activity, you have to have present energy that is in alignment with doing that activity. And this comes in, so, and there's nuances here. So you can feel like, oh, I don't really want to do the thing, and you force yourself to do it. And yes, it will garner results, but if you are more in alignment with the activity, aka you going to the gym because you love it, you're not forcing yourself to go to the gym because whatever, right? It's the energy present, and even in doing the action, it's the energy that is driving. It's the energy and the intelligence in the body and in our field that is driving the physical body to do what we want it to do. So people can say it's our brain that drives it, but actually it's the intelligence that is behind the function of the brain. It's the intelligence, it's the signaling that's behind every action, every function of our body, everything, all those chemical reactions. When the mitochondria are doing their thing, it's the charge of the field that's moving, that's oscillating through the body at any given moment, and the continual feedback loops between our brain and our body and the environment that is So for example, it could be, you know, if somebody were to ask me, is it more important to focus on how the dream is going to come true, or is it more important to focus on the dream itself? In my opinion, based on what I've just presented, it's more important to focus on the dream itself, because when you're focused on that and you're totally engrossed in it, the means in which aligned action comes will just naturally present itself. Whether you read an article and it sparks an idea, you just naturally have an idea, it occurs to you. So, right? So there's this idea. So it's energy first. It's dreams first. It's your reason for doing things, right? That spark the action, that create the experience.
I would add to this, or yeah, from my viewpoint, I see that intention is the thing that matters the most. So, what changed in the two experiences, for example, just coming back to the dream experience, as an example, previously, I had the intention that I'm gonna exercise just so I can look a certain way. But
Mhm.
now I have the intention to exercise because the action of doing so makes me happy. And my intention behind it is to make myself healthier and happier in this body at this moment, at this space and time. And so I think, yeah, you say energy, but I think energy comes from the intention. It doesn't really matter what activity we do if we have the right intention doing that. And I think when we set an intention, that calls in the energy that will guide the whole activity. Let's say I do something that I really don't like doing. Just thinking about something. Um, let's say that I have to read 100 research papers, which are, let's be honest, quite boring. And my intention to do this activity is um, just so um, I can I can write my essay. But if I have the intention that I'm actually curious what's inside those research papers, I think the the energy of the whole activity will shift from a force of doing the activity to um, almost like a fun activity. And so I think setting that intention or having that intention behind every single action we have creates a whole new experience. And that comes to the food as well. Why people are blessing um, their food. Because if you think about it, when you have the intention to just mindlessly scroll on your phone and quickly eat your food because you don't have time or you're working and you're just eating, your intention is not to nourish your body. Your intention is either enjoyment or get a break from your day through scrolling your phone, or also just get through this as fast as possible because I don't have time. Or if you take 5 seconds to set a good intention to nourish your body, that's going to change the whole experience of eating that meal.
Yeah, I would agree 100%. And that is, you know, really it's and what I probably should have added, but so thank you for that, is that it's you know, one of the biggest factors is the thinking and the way that we think, and the type. So it's the quality. It's not just the quality of our thoughts, but you could even say it's the quality of the consciousness that we're interacting and that we're connected to at any given time, because it's the consciousness that's really the everything that everything is a part of, right? So, you know, whether it's, and this is why, you know, when we get stuck in continual repetitive dysfunctional thinking about So let me just quantify this. So you have, you know, so you have the practical mind, and for different people that's going to look differently. But this is the mind for like say you're writing a research paper, or you're problem solving, or you're engaged in a conversation of some kind for the purposes of you know, practical living. Okay, so that's one aspect. Now, the second mind, or the second aspect, is the mind, the part of mind that is wrapped up in identity. And this is where, you know, this is not just, you know, give me the facts and we'll have a conversation about the facts, right? You know, and so that extremely left brain kind of communication. So this is the mind. This is basically the ego, which judges, which assumes, which worries, which creates anxiety, which compares, which defends, which seeks out revenge, which wants to be, you know, wants to be a prick, you know, or you know, say I don't know, say your boyfriend does something that kind of triggers you, and you set his, I don't know, you set his tires on fire. I don't know. I'm just, you know, I'm using and I'm not meaning you, obviously, but you know, just an extreme example just to illustrate the point. But then you have this ever expansive piece, which is really when you're tapping into the deeper part of you. And I mean, there's a million different ways you could describe this, because we have, you know, we have our life force, we have our soul, and then we have our bridge with the earth and with source itself. And really the soul is just a more refined version of source which is where our energetic blueprint is conducted. So they're not separate, but there's the aspects that are more divine in nature and more exist at a higher density or in a higher dimension, that reside within our body so that we can have this experience. And so once you understand that, and where the core error is that people mistake, first of all, they think that their body is like dense. It is, but it's not solid. I mean, you as a scientist would know that better than anybody, right? It's not dense. It's actually 99.9% empty space. And so when we start to view ourselves from that standpoint and we start to interact, and I would suspect that with these, you know, with these I'm going to call them games, but these games that you like to play when you get curious and you're on the train and you're just kind of looking around, and you know, you're curious about what that guy's thinking, or you know, your curiosity completely takes over, right? That is, you know, from a functional standpoint, that is you going in to that more expansive state where you're now starting to tap into the field at large, and it's going to feel more natural. And that's because you've connected with you, like the part of, and the part of you that where the alignment happens, because you're doing things that you are naturally designed to do and that you naturally get enjoyment from.
Yeah, I think there's an element of, you mentioned that thinking is a very important part of it, right?
Yeah. Okay. Sorry. Yeah. Just let me loop back.
Yes.
So I described those three aspects of quote unquote thinking, because you experience the thoughts, you know, most of the thoughts in this piece of real estate. But the reality is that when you're actually connected to when you're connected to your entire body, you actually connect to that universal mind. And so the practical, like the egoic thinking, which is where most people live most of the time, or what we would call a beta frequency, like beta waves, is such a small fraction. It's like I mean, it's just not even conceivable of what a minute percentage of your entire totality actually is. And that's just the point that I want to illustrate, because, you know, the root goal in this work that we're doing is to get people to understand and experience that there is so much more to experience based on this little tiny, you know, this little tiny piece of what people think is who they are, because they're basing their thoughts in external identity.
Very interesting what you are sharing there. And I believe that we don't have to, we are not responsible for the things that are not in our reality.
No.
And so what I mean by that, okay, that is true that we are a very small segment of a whole universe, right? Like, it's unbelievable how much we don't know. But the reason why we are in this moment, exactly in this moment, surrounded by exactly these objects, these people, um, these colors, these smells, is because we are meant to use them to decode that current situation. And you mentioned thinking as an important part of it, and I have to agree. But I would change it to observing our thinking is the important part. Not just thinking, but observing what we think is important, because that's going to give us the guideline, a guidance of, okay, you are experiencing this,
Mm-hmm.
and this is your thought. And then there could be a lot of question marks, like, why? What's the relationship between what you see, what you um, sense in this reality? What are your thoughts? And then what is the underlying subconscious belief and programming that make you have those thoughts? And what is the experience um, trying to show you? And these, like the experience, your thoughts, and the subconscious are all connected, right? So observing your thoughts are gonna get you closer to why you are here and what's your actual um, goal in this life. But like, what's your actual purpose in this life? By
Mm-hmm.
observing your thoughts and the reality itself. And I think that's where our work come in very important and very useful. And I connect back to the question that you asked me, like, what do I do at these meetings and why do I facilitate these meetings? Is because it is so hard for ourselves to connect these things because we are not trained to do so. It is a lot easier to see the parallels and the symmetries and the reasonings behind these things if someone asks the right questions from us. And so I think that's, we can bring so many examples to this, but even this podcast, that's what you do, right? You are asking the right questions to get out information from me that could be useful for others. And that's the same what I do in my work, and why I do all these events is because I'm trying to ask the right questions for people to guide them to their own truth, to guide them to observe their own reality and thinking, and help them live a more fulfilled, happier, healthier life, and help them find their purpose based on those realities that they experience. And is that something that you do as well with your work here?
Yeah. So one thing I have found is that using the blueprint